I would be using my sphere as a stool. I trace counterclockwise circles on it with my fingertips, and it shrunk until I could palm it. My bolt had shifted while I had been sitting. I pulled it up and yanked the plates straight. As I carried around tables, chairs, globes, and slow-moving frogs, I passed under a stone arch into the scriptorium. The place smelled richly of ink. Maybe it was because of an ancient frog, and his two fids were copying out books there. But I wondered how long it would take to stop smelling that way if no one ever used it at all. A lot of ink had been spent there, and the wet smell of it must be deep into everything. At the other end, a smaller doorway led to the old library, which was one of the original buildings that stood right on the Colister. Its stone floor, 2,300 years old than that of the new library, was so smooth under the soles of my feet that I could scarcely feel it. I could have found my way with my eyes closed by letting my feet read the memory worn into it by those gone before. The cloister was a roofed gallery around the perimeter of a rectangular garden. On the inner side, nothing separated it from the weather except the row of columns that held up its roof. On the outer side, it was bounded by a wall, openings in which gave way to buildings such as the old library, the refectory, and various chalk holes. Every object I passed, the carven bookcase ends, the stones looked together to make the floor, the frames on the windows, the forged hinges of the doors, and the hand-made nails that fastened them to the wood. The capitals of the columns that surrounded the cloister, the paths, and the beds of the garden itself, every one had been made in a particular form by a clever person a long time ago. Some of them, such as the doors of the old library, had consumed the whole lifetimes of those who had wrought, wrought them. Others looked as though they had been tossed off in an idle afternoon, but with such upside that they had been cherished for hundreds or thousands of years. Some were founded on pure simple geometry, others revealed in complication, and it was a sort of riddle. Wherever there was any rule governing their forms, still others were depictions of actual people who had lived and thought interesting things at one time or another, or bearing that of general types, the deulator, the physiologer, the burger, and the swine. If someone had asked, I might have been able to explain a quarter of them. One day, I would be able to explain them all. Sunlight crashed into the Collister garden, where grass and gravel paths were interwoven among stands of herbs, shrubs, and occasional tree. I reached back over my shoulder, caught the slivage end of my bolt, and drew it up over my head. I tugged down on the half of the bolt that hung below my sword so that its frying edge swept the ground and covered my feet. I thrust my hand together in the folds at my waist, just above the sword, and stepped out into the grass. This was pale green, pale green and prickly, as the weather had been hot. As I came out into the open, I looked to the south dial of the clock. 2 minutes to go. Fralio, I said, I do not think that Slashberry is among the 164, meaning the list of planets that were allowed to be cultivated under the second new revised book of discipline. Leo was stockier than I. When younger, he had been chubby, but now he was just solid on a patch of disrupted earth in the shades of an apple tree. He was squatting, hypnotized by the dirt. He had warped the slivage of the slivage end of his bolt around his waist and between his thighs in the basic modesty knot. The reminder he had rolled up into a tight cylinder, which he had tied at each end with his sword, and then slung diagonally on his back like a bedroll. He followed his lead. Um, no one else had followed his lead. I had to admit it. It looked comfortable, if stupid. On a warm day, his bottom was 10 inches of the ground. He had made his sphere about the size of his head and was balancing on it.